Okay, here we are again, Tammy. Excellent. So, what do you do if your horse gets injured?
Ah, the bane of existence for every horse owner. Um, Horses are always going to get injured. They do silly things. They're horses. They might get injured out in the pasture. They might get injured in their stall. They are prone to injuries. And if there's something that can go wrong, it will with horses. And it's the worst nightmare, obviously, of every horse owner, especially if you only have one horse, because then you're out of a horse. You don't get to ride. The most unpleasant, or I should say the most stressful types of injuries are soft tissue injuries for horses: tendons, ligaments, strains, tears. And they happen a lot with sport horses because sport horses are working, they're doing sports. And just like any athlete, they get injuries from overuse, from stress, from accidental, missteps, things like that. So there are two really key things to think about when you have an injured horse, because you first have to think about the horse and getting him well, him or her, um, and recovering from the injury. There's a lot to talk about with that, and I'll go into a little bit of that. But then there's also the fact that now you are not riding anymore. And after 6 or 8 weeks or 3 months, whatever it ends up being, of careful rehabilitation, you get back on your horse and your body is probably not prepared for that, especially when the tendency for horses that have been on stall rest and have been hand walking and doing this whole recovery rehabilitation thing is that they suddenly have all this energy. And you're more likely to have confidence issues. You're more likely to have spooks. You're more likely to have the horse that does something silly the first and second ride back when you're rehabilitating a horse. So we need to address the horse's fitness and conditioning the horse while it's injured. We also need to address the rider's condition. It doesn't have to be horrible. It can actually, you can turn it into a really helpful exercise for both yourself and your horse. Let's talk about the horse real quick. Let's say your horse has a soft tissue injury. They are going to be on stall rest for a certain period of time, which means they're not going to be getting turned out. Most likely you'll be going out and hand walking the horse for 15 or 20 minutes every day. They are going to be extra energetic because they're used to going out, probably in turnout, and they're definitely used to working and exercising. So we'll talk about safety first. Utmost importance is the rider's safety or the handler's safety. I would put that over the horse's safety, just because if something happens to you, your horse is worse off, right? The horse is already injured, but we certainly don't want to make that worse, and we don't want to have the horse exacerbate their injury. So we need to talk about things like getting the horse out of the stall and walking safely without it blowing a fuse, without it dancing around on its hind legs or kicking out or whatever the horse might tend to do. Now, there are a lot of horses that are super good about being out of work and being on the disabled list. And so a lot of people aren't going to have a big problem with this. But there are some horses that tend to get really cranky and tend to get really hot when they are without exercise. And that's pretty normal. One thing I will say, and I'll just put this out there because I'm a firm believer in safety. And I don't care what you have to do to keep yourself safe, do it. If that means you need to give your horse a sedative before you walk it, if that means you need to put a chain over the horse's nose before you walk it, if that means you need to get somebody else to help you handle your horse, do it. Don't feel bad about it. Don't feel like you're doing something wrong. There is no wrong way to be safe. There's just being safe and being unsafe. So first, really take that seriously. There are short-term sedatives that you can feed the horse. It's a little tablet, ACE. Most horse owners know about ACE, apromazine, I think is the name of it. Super easy to feed the horse with a little handful of grain or something. Most horses will eat it right out of your hand. There are also long-acting sedatives. Reserpine is one that my vet has told me about. It's an injectable and it's supposed to last for like 3 months, something like that. So there are options. Talk to your vet. And then the other part of this is, making sure that you're walking your horse on the appropriate ground, because horses that have soft tissue injuries need to be walking on hard, level ground. They shouldn't be on soft, deep footing, because that'll just make the tendons be more stressed. And they shouldn't be on uneven footing like hills or something like that, because that again puts additional stress on those soft tissue tendons and ligaments. Now, what about the rider? I mean, your vet is going to give you a really comprehensive rehab program. It usually looks like hand walking for a certain number of weeks, and then a recheck, and then walking under saddle for a certain number of weeks, and adding a little bit of trot here and there. But at what point do you get on the horse? That's going to be up to your vet. And when you do, you don't want to have a body that's sitting there going, oh, I haven't done this for 4 weeks or 6 weeks. I'm tight and stiff and I can't move with the horse, and now the horse is going to spook, or the horse is going to do something silly, and all of a sudden I'm going to be really uncomfortable. So here's the thing. Taking the time that you are already taking to hand walk your horse, or do whatever it is that you're doing with your horse, you can add a few exercises in there for yourself as you're walking your horse around. Your horse might look at you funny, but it might actually entertain your horse. That you can do these exercises while you're walking around in the arena or on the road or wherever it is that you're going to be doing your primary rehabilitation with the horse, that will keep your body exercised in a way that when you do get back on the horse, it doesn't feel like you ever stopped riding. Now that's kind of a big statement, right? How is it possible to do exercises when you're not riding and have it feel like you never stopped riding? That's a big ask, right? But it is possible. And I have experienced it myself. I've had clients who've experienced it. I get, whenever one of my clients has a horse that gets injured and then they get back on after doing ride fit exercises, they're like, oh my gosh, I'm actually riding better now than I did before the horse got injured. So it is a big ask, but it is entirely possible. And I think that's one of the coolest things about these ride fit exercises that I personally think is a huge, huge thing. It really is for the amateur rider, right? That's not riding 6 or 8 horses a day, or even 2 or 3. It's just great for that, especially for those riders. And so what kind of exercises? Let's see. Here's one you can do while you're walking your horse. You can do walking lunges, which basically means you're walking forward and then you're lunging down, reaching one of your knees toward the ground, and then standing up and taking the next step. So that slows everything down. The horse has to kind of stay with you, which is really good for the horse to have to do. It's not just beneficial to your body, but it's also beneficial to the horse to then make sure that the horse is keeping his attention on you. So it's actually useful for all sorts of things. One thing I would stress about that walking lunge, especially for riders, is thinking about and focusing on the stretch of the back leg, the leg that is reaching for the ground. So as you're lunging, one of your legs is stretching out behind you. Really feel that hip flexor stretch and focus on that. that exercise is great because it also strengthens the quads. It challenges your balance, which is great for your brain to have to adapt to. And I promise, if you do that for 1 minute, and this is the challenge, 1 minute of walking lunges, you're going to be huffing and puffing. I don't care how fit you are, if you do them right. Let's see. Another great exercise for riders who are hand walking, who are not on the horse, would be, as you're walking your horse around, doing some shoulder shrugs, shoulder circles, right? So you lift your shoulders up and back and down. Now, one quick caveat about shoulder circles. Because we human beings tend to bring our shoulders forward, and this is kind of a really common, if you're tired, your shoulders slump. If you're sitting in front of a computer, your shoulders slump. If you slouch, your shoulders slump. I almost never ask a rider to do shoulder circles from back to front. It's always from front to back, because we always need to do more opening of our shoulders and our chest than we do 9 to 5 or 23 hours of the rest of the day, right? So another thing you can do is just lift your arm. You can add this, lift of your arms. Your horse can be in one hand, right? And you can have the other arm up and doing that shoulder circle. And that isolates the shoulder joint even more. And what this does for a rider is, because we tend to hold all of our tension up here, we hold all our stress up here, it mobilizes these joints in ways that we don't often mobilize them. And when we sit on the horse, our shoulders need to be relaxed. They need to hang down. Our shoulder blades need to be able to kind of bounce up and down behind our backs. And that's one of our biggest spots of tension. So shoulder circles while you're walking your horse. You cannot do too many. Now, let me say that again. You cannot do too many shoulder circles if you're a rider, because they're so beneficial. Even if you're not a rider. You know that, Jesse, right?
Absolutely. I always used to have a teacher of mine that always picked on me because my shoulder rotated forward a little bit. It's common, especially for people that spend a lot of time doing bench press or push-ups. They end up, the pecs get shorter and they pull their shoulders forward and out of alignment.
Absolutely.
So I used to get picked on all the time for that. So
Yeah.
I was always thinking posture.
And swimmers, especially swimmers who are doing forward stroke, they tend to get these shoulders that like to stay up here all the time. And it's, largely because of big muscles, right? But still. I turned that ringer off. I don't know why it rang at me. So let's see. Let's go through a couple more exercises. If you are brave and your horse is mellow about hand walking, you can add a skip in your hand walking. So a skip, as like a little kid skipping along, you have to do it slowly, so it's more of an up and down thing. But there's a trick to a skip too, which is really important, and that is to make it diagonal. So I've noticed, I've watched lots and lots of riders try to skip. And it's interesting that as we get older, we tend to become lateralized in our body. Our natural state is to be diagonal. So for example, and maybe I can get a video clip of this to add, when you skip, the way a kid would skip typically is that, say, their right arm and their left leg will be skipping up together, and then the left arm and right leg will be skipping together. Now, I see a lot of people end up with the same arm and same leg skipping at the same time, which is really interesting. We talk with our horses about our horses' walk becoming compromised when it becomes lateral. And that means that the two beats of the walk on each side happen too close together. So instead of 1, 2, 3, 4, it becomes 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's really fascinating to me how the human body can do the same thing, especially if there's been an injury. And then we go through physical therapy and rehabilitation work. that tends to cause some sort of a disconnection between the two sides of our bodies. This is managed up here in our brains. And I read this fascinating study that happened some years back where they tested children who did diagonalized exercises like skipping versus children who didn't do those sorts of exercises. And what they found was the diagonalized exercises increased cognition, and those children were able to learn to read more easily and quicker than the kids who didn't do diagonalized movements.
Wow.
So this isn't just for physical body, this is also to keep your brain working properly. And as we all know, well, we might not all know this, but I'll say it. The most important aid that a rider has, the most important tool that a rider has in their toolbox is their mind, because we're the ones that think through what we're doing with the horse. So keeping that thing healthy is really important. So skipping. While you're walking the horse, along beside the horse, you can skip. I like to encourage people to add a twist to the skip. So as you're skipping, say you're skipping like this, you're skipping and twisting your body, and not just your upper body, but also your head so that your eyes move around too. This really challenges your balance, really challenges your proprioception, and just a simple little skip can have enormous benefits for riders. So we've got walking lunges, we've got shoulders, shrugs, circles, and we've got skipping. So there's 3 exercises that you can do for 20 minutes while you hand walk that will already make a big difference in your body for riding when your horse is recovered fully from or is ready to be ridden again. There are several more that we could talk about. They get a little bit involved. And so it's probably easier to look at those in videos. And I think we probably have some video clips that people can go and see either on the Facebook page or out on the website. So yeah, check those out. In fact, maybe I'll write a blog post about rehabbing and exercises you can do to keep your body fit and in shape for riding after this video.
Awesome. That was great. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. My pleasure.